Hi guys. I wanted to do a few minutes of kind of feedback on some sales process elements that we use when talking to enterprise customers. Because enterprise customers are obviously what we all want, but there's some very specific things that we've found we that work best, and things that we've found are very helpful in the whole sales process part of it. Um, Podio is a great tool for enterprise, um, but it also they get concerned about it, and they get concerned about it because they don't understand how it works. They don't understand what's involved. So this very short video is just gonna kind of talk about a bit about enterprise customers and some of the key things to think about. First thing is IT departments are your death. You probably already know this. I'm probably teaching everybody grammars to suck eggs, but IT departments are the death of Podio because they don't understand what it is. They don't really care about the business element of what we can improve with Podio, right? They care about the IT element. They care about their servers and they care about their workstations. And to be fair to them, they care about data security and things like that. But they don't, their driver is very rarely the driver of the management team of an enterprise company, the driver of the production management, who wants more efficiency or financial, who wants to stem losses in terms of wasted materials or increase profitability by increasing efficiency over here. That's not really their concern. So if you're speaking to IT departments or you're targeting RT departments, get out and look more towards the finance, management, production, people who are experiencing pain points, which Podio can really solve. Um, give you an example. Manufacturing logistics is a sector I know back of my hand, and production managers really do suffer a lot of times from bad systems. They bad systems from inventory tracking, bad systems from managing production lines, um, and the more you can identify their pains and draw the line between where they're doing it badly now into where they can be doing it well with Podio, the more you can get them interested and start them kind of starting the ball for you with the decision makers, right? With enterprise, you very rarely get to the decision maker right away. You tend to start balls rolling, and then enough momentum comes where someone goes, "Look, we need to talk about this seriously because there's an opportunity here." That brings me to the sort of sales process that we use. I thought I'd just kind of give you a few elements of what we found very successful. When we start going into meetings, the first thing that we tend to do is we fill out internally a needs analysis document, which we get from the first kind of initial meetings we have, phone calls, sit down meetings if we're having them, and we try and draw out key things, key questions we ask, like what systems they're using at the moment, where are those systems not meeting the needs, what are parts of the system that are inefficient or are causing problems, what parts of the company are not in any systems. Particularly like I always ask, so do you use Excel to manage any of these parts? And invariably someone will say, well, yeah, this bit we do keep on Excel, and you can pounce on that and say, oh, interesting. Tell me a bit more about that. The purpose of the document and the purpose of that line of questioning is to be able to go back to them to set up a more detailed meeting, but to go back to them with a very specific list of things they have talked about as being challenges and drawing a direct line as to how Podio can make that better and the systems we're developing make that better. That kind of element of drawing out, tell me a bit about your system, tell me a bit about the problems with that, tell me, how do your people interact with this? Who interacts with this? Is there anybody missing from that stick? Do people find it easy to interact with? Finding more about the user experience, finding about where who in the operational chain is actually interacting with systems and where it breaks down, which a lot of times it does. Those are all bits that you can start to draw and say, okay, well, it sounds like, I'll give you an example. Um, a lot of times people aren't entering information properly into systems. Why is that? It's not just because everybody's lazy. although everybody is. Um, it's because either they've not been trained properly, they've not been managed effectively, or because the process of doing so is actually more difficult than just doing some other quicker way. And that's where, because we can custom design the user experience in Podio, not from the looks, but from the things they fill in and the parts of Podio that they see, we can create a more easy and kind of user-led experience. And Podio is very good at that, and something that you so drawing out that understanding of, do you have parts of the system that are breaking down in terms of usage? Do you have parts of the system that are not addressed? Parts of your business that aren't addressed in the system? Those are key parts for the enterprise. Another massive bit for an enterprise level, and I touched on it in the kind of sales overview video, is this notion of phased implementation. And I think this is a critical thing to understand about Podio. Um, because we can build almost any functionality in Podio, we can compartmentalize and then literally attach another room, in essence. If you think about it like a building, Podio is the perfect example of a modular building where you can move it around in seconds to completely change the way it is. So if you could imagine a house where if you needed another room, you simply could bolt one on. That's kind of what Podio is. And from a phased implementation point of view, that's really important. It's a really important thing to get across because companies at the enterprise level tend to have existing systems that they're not always necessarily willing to completely ditch. They've invested a lot of money, resource, training, they've got lots of people use it, and they're worried. Find the niche that we can slot into. Find that little bit of functionality that isn't happening. With Podio's API, we can invariably connect to their existing system most of the time. Sometimes we can't, but most of the time. Which means we can fill these gaps really well. And once we fill one gap and we're in, it's so much easier to broaden out and start picking off other bits of functionality. So rather than trying to go in whole hog with like, let me build this massive system, it's going to do your finances, your logistics, your manufacturing. Sometimes you find that one wedge. I call it a sales wedge, an arrow. The pointy end of the arrow goes through. Um, Find that one thing that we can get in, build, and get running into Podio. And once they see how efficient that is, once they see how much better it is, you can start to pick off the surrounding bits. That also, from a phased implementation point of view, you may be talking to a company who actually does want to get rid of some old systems, but isn't sure how. And that's again where Podio can really win over other systems because imagine if you've got an enterprise company and they've got this sort of custom built system and they're thinking of they want to get rid of it because it's not supported anymore, it's old and it's clunky and it looks like DOS or Windows 95. um, they got real concerns. Business continuity is one, data security and integrity is two, training and user is three. um, and so they're usually stuck in trying to figure out what it is. Now, one option is to go to many different systems, to integrate Salesforce for this and other parts of systems. Um, and that's a way we've seen people go, you know. But with Podio, what we can do is we can be picking off bits of their business at a time and slowly migrating the old out and slowly migrating the new in. We're speaking to a company right now where if are successful, which we've not been yet in getting the project, but if we are, and we can do this sort of phased approach, you're probably looking at a 3-year phased approach because it's they've got 11,000 employees with some complicated systems. So you're probably looking at phasing in one bit, phasing out one bit, bedding it in, phasing in another bit, phasing out one bit, bedding it in. And the brilliant bit about Podio is because it always looks the same, because the user experience is the same. Once we've built one room, you know how the house works. You add another room, the thing works the same way. And that actually means that scaling a customer's Podio system up is from a user perspective, from a training perspective, from a intuition and a user's a user interface point of view. They understand how to, once they've got mastered one, they understand the rest of it. And so that's a key bit to get across. If you're looking at phased approaches, the learning curve rapidly drops with Podio, because once they've got one, they've got the whole thing. So you can start to plan out a phased implementation, which picks off bits and pieces. We're doing one right now with we're doing an implementation, a design implementation with a government agency in Lithuania, and we are literally sort of right now we're doing the CRM and project management, phasing that in, training them. We're then going to add in email communication tracking and inventory management. But by that point, they'll have been using the system for 3 months. So the learning curve on the new one should really be down to very minimal. That's a key thing to get across for enterprise point of view. So I hope this is useful. If you've got any questions about if you've got any enterprise people and you've got any questions or you want a little help with them, just drop us a line, because enterprise can be tricky, and you really have to understand how you know how Podio works well and how you can replace certain bits of functionality, what is possible and what isn't. One other just final thing I'll add is a note about API linking. Um, Obviously, with the Podio API, we can link to many, many systems and do many, many things. At an enterprise level, API becomes more crucial, mainly because things can't break, if that makes sense. We're scoping a project right now which has to do with financial documents, and we could theoretically use Globiflow and write signature on its own to do the whole process that we need to, but the chances are is that we will actually build an API and manage the process on our own engine, in terms of offsite in our own Amazon Web Service. And that's mainly because if Podio does go down or Globiflow hooks don't fire, which happens, you lose that automation, you lose that, and the client will suddenly experience things not happening. Um, at an enterprise level, you should indicate that the API is open and that there's a huge amount of security in process by the API. Because what we can do is we can make sure that if something is supposed to happen, we check if it happened, and if it doesn't, we fire it when we can. Of Globiflow can't do that natively, really. Of course, Podio can catch up on things, but there are things that get missed. The API actually gives us a huge advantage in that, and so just having an understanding of that for yourself as to where the API comes into things. When you're talking enterprise, invariably you're going to be talking API at some level, if they're doing critical things. So, like I said, this is just a bit of a help on enterprise selling. Drop me a line if you've got any. It's Jordan. Thanks.